2020 has been a trash year, to say the least, but at least the music from this year has brought us some very good records. I think I'll just leave it at that. My top 10 albums of 2020. At number 10 comes Trivium with What the Dead Men Say. Trivium is a band with a history and a tendency to change genre every few albums. With that said, with their 9th album, Trivium seems to be sticking with what they've been doing for the past 2 albums. What the Dead Men Say is a modern heavy metal album with a bit of metalcore sprinkled every here and there. You might not find something you've never heard before on this album, but what you will find is a collection of tasty riffs, and if you're more of a solo person, your sonic taste buds will not be disappointed either. And not to mention the amazing drumming that we've already come to expect since their latest drummer, Alex Bent, joined the band. At number 9 we have Code Orange, Underneath. This is Code Orange's 4th album and their 3rd one since they dropped the kids from their name. This time around, the band dropped some of its earlier hardcore influence to embrace their industrial side. Underneath still has some heavy-hitting breakdowns, but it also implements some ridiculous industrial noises. This album also features a lot more clean singing, inspired by 2000's new and industrial metal, probably to the dismay of their true hardcore fans. And while clean singing isn't necessarily something bad, most of the songs featuring cleans on this album sound like something you'd hear on the soundtrack of a wrestling game. This makes even more sense seeing that Code Orange have played wrestling events before. Still, some songs on this album hit hard, regardless of their inclusion of cleans. You and You Alone is full of weird noises, a weird and harrowing melodic break in the middle, and ends with a breakdown that constantly shifts tempo. The Easy Way features singer Jamie Morgan, who usually does scream vocals, doing clean singing reminiscent of Marilyn Manson. In fact, the entire song embraces the more electronic side of industrial music. It's extremely catchy, and more of an industrial rock anthem than anything else. At number 8 we have Enter Shikari with Nothing Is True and Everything Is Possible. This is the 6th album of Enter Shikari, veterans in mixing electronic music with post-hardcore and rock. In fact, they used to make music back when mixing metalcore with electronic music was considered a whole genre of its own. This album is a collection of pop rock and synth pop bangers, with 2 or 3 generic filler songs sprinkled in between. Now, the filler songs, although a bit boring, serve as a breather between the more demanding songs on this album. And some songs on this album are truly genius. Some of the bangers include The Great Unknown, in all caps, the opener and mood setter, giving off outer space vibes both musically and lyrically. The Dreamer's Hotel, which takes on the topic of making it online, featuring some truly thick synths and riffs and a unique yelly vocal delivery. My favorite song, or rather songs, are the 2 marionette songs, which tell the story of the masses discovering the fact that the masters are not untouchable. Part 1 being from the perspective of a servant warning the master that the masses are waking up, and part 2 conveyed in a harrowing spoken word coming from the perspective of the masses. Great album, give it a listen. At number 7 we have Liturgy, The Origin of the Alimonies. The Origin of the Alimonies is the 5th studio album by Liturgy. This release came as a surprise seeing as Liturgy released an album, HAQQ, just last year. And damn, what an album. Since HAQQ was my album of the year, I obviously came into this with high expectations, and I was somewhat surprised by what I heard. This album is not your typical black metal album, not even by the standards we've come to expect from its composer, Hunter Hunt Hendricks. This album absolutely includes the unique flavor of black metal that Liturgy makes, but at its core, this is an orchestral opera, something I have way less experience with and absolutely no interest in up to this point. And this one is a hard listen, but I still enjoy it a lot and have come to love it. And I will not even pretend to understand the intricate theological themes and topics that HHH is presenting and exploring on this one. One of my favorite parts of this album is the opening track, the separation of Huck from Hael, which, after building up to something with an orchestra, crescendos into the transcendental black metal we've come to know and love from Liturgy. Another highlight is the fall of Sihaim, a very dissonant and confused song, with instruments both orchestral and black metal playing over each other. The following track, Sihaim's Lament, is probably my favorite. This song starts with Hunt Hendricks doing her black metal screams over an orchestral instrumental and ends in an almost genty, but not quite, breakdown. At number 6, we have Dorian Electra's My Agenda. This Dorian Electra album is the follow-up to their critically acclaimed debut album, Flamboyant. Now, Flamboyant was a concept album exploring masculinities, particularly mostly queer masculinities, and it was an absolute hit. Knowing that, I was afraid that their follow-up could never live up to the expectations and standards that Flamboyant set. Flamboyant just so happens to be the first pop album that I have enjoyed in a while. Or maybe it is the first pop album I have allowed myself to enjoy in a while. See, I lived many years as a closed-minded, in air quotes, metalhead, but hearing so many fellow queer people praise this album, I decided to give it a try, and damn, I was hooked. So, maybe it's more of a personal thing, the expectations I had for its follow-up. Maybe I was afraid that pop music wasn't something I actually enjoyed, and more of a one-off thing. Phase. Well, since My Agenda is on this list, I can safely say that pop music wasn't a one-off thing, and neither was Flamboyant for Dorian. Musically, My Agenda sees a departure from the more standard pop with a touch of arena rock. My Agenda is more out there. My Agenda is musical genius of Flamboyant but turned to 11. My Agenda is experimental. My Agenda is more like hyperpop a la 100 gecs, jumping from genre to genre within one song. But most importantly, My Agenda is still Dorian Electra. Lyrically, this album is yet again an exploration of masculinities, but this time, the masculinities are dangerous. My Agenda puts toxic masculinities, especially those of the denizens of the internet, under the microscope. What can be observed ranges from cringe, masterfully coded in hyperpop by Dorian in songs like Edgelord, featuring none other than Rebecca Black of Friday fame, to outright dangerous rhetoric, as can be witnessed on songs like F the World, where the protagonist's hate for the world turns violent. I could spend more time analyzing this album, but maybe you should just go and listen to it. It's only 25 minutes. At number 5 we have Greg Puciato, Child Soldier, Creator of God. This is the solo debut of the Dillinger Escape Plan singer Greg Puciato. Child Soldier, Creator of God is a 64-minute long musical experience that includes all kinds of sounds. From the synth pop on songs such as A Pair of Questions, a catchy bop that's easy to digest and sees Puciato singing softly in a low head voice and features a cute little guitar solo during the bridge and an even cuter guitar solo in the outro, to the industrial rock and metal of songs like Do You Need Me to Remind You, which features an intro with a guitar tone so thick it could probably win an arm wrestling tournament, verses where the singing is only accompanied by drums and bass, with the aforementioned guitar joining in for the chorus, a bridge where Puciato pulls off the highest shriek he's able to pull off, and a droning ambient guitar and high reverb screams outro. And every here and there, there's a bit of noise, such as in what I can only call the second intro track and title track, Creator of God, or in the first half of the song Roaches, where you're hit and overwhelmed by a wall of sound, every instrument and Puciato shrieking all happening at once. What I'm trying to convey is that this album is a collage of many different sounds that fit together perfectly. My only complaint being that it's quite the lengthy listen. But if you can stand the 64 minutes and are aware that it's a heavy listen, I'd highly recommend this album. At number 4 we have Zeal and Ardor, Wake of a Nation. This is a new EP from Zeal and Ardor. Wake of a Nation mixes elements of soul and gospel with black metal and was written as a reaction to the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests, and it's an emotional, topical, gut-wrenching 17 minutes. Musically, while there's a couple of mellower songs on this record, I feel like this is the most black metal album put out there by Zeal and Ardor. Obviously, this album doesn't have the cassette recorder sound of your black metal of olden. The production on this album is very raw, very unpolished. It feels like this was taken directly out of the studio. Someone threw a glance at it once or twice and then put it out there. For people who maybe saw Zeal and Ardor live, it will probably be no surprise to know that even such a raw recording will be a musical masterpiece. In fact, literally my only criticism to this is that it leaves me wanting for more. But the musicianship on this EP isn't the only thing that makes me love it. Wake of a Nation is an eye-opener when it comes to the narrative. Take, for example, the song Tuskegee. Musically, it's basically a raw, extreme metal song with some clean vocals here and there. What I personally didn't even know about were the events that inspired the lyrics of the song, the Tuskegee medical experiments on black people. The song At the Seams is a harrowing tune written from the perspective of a mother who is aware of the injustices that her child is going to endure. At its harrowing peak in the outro, Manuel, the singer, sings, or rather speaks in German. He sings, "He told you that he can breathe," for 8 minutes, a scream into the darkness. I think there's something to be said about the choice to write these lines in German, with Germany having its own problem and its own crisis with racism and policing, continuously brushed aside by politicians and people who benefit from the status quo. The same goes for Austria, and I can only assume that it's also the case in Switzerland, which is Manuel's and Zeal and Ardor's home. At number 3 we have Bring Me the Horizon, post-human survival horror. And at number 3 we have another EP. Although, with the length of this one, I have to wonder why not just slap the label album on it. With the last couple of records that BMTH has released, I've come to expect more mellow music from them, especially after the statement that was heavy metal on their last full-length release. And honestly, that's fine. I think BMTH is at their best not when they're heavy, but when they're experimental, and I absolutely got that from Amo. So, imagine my surprise when they put out Survival Horror, which is probably their heaviest record since Sempiternal. This EP isn't only heavy, but also extremely experimental, with a staggering amount of features that complement the style BMTH chose to do for this release, alternative and new metal. And conceptually, this release is an exploration of the mental health crisis that has sprung due to the pandemic and the lockdown. While this release isn't quite the early metalcore and deathcore that the old fans might have wanted, the opener Dear Diary is probably close enough to satisfy. Vocally, this song follows a similar pattern, with screamed verses and a melodic but still somewhat distorted chorus. And, of course, the breakdown isn't missing either, and holy fuck, that thrash metal solo after the first chorus is maybe the most unexpected and yet the peak perfect thing to put in this song. However, my personal favorite has to be the anthemic Kingslayer, the song featuring baby metal. This song even features Oli doing growls and squeals the way he did on their early releases, and in general, it feels like the song is specifically made both to annoy metal elitists and to play on BMTH's and baby metal strengths. The fact that the song ends on a breakdown with glitchy vocals just feels like the cherry on the cake, marrying old BMTH to new BMTH. At number 2 we have Poppy, I Disagree. Yeah, at number 2 comes this industrial metal and rock juggernaut from none other than Poppy of YouTube fame. I Disagree came very early in the year and had me very excited for what this year was going to offer on the music front. And who expected to have such a great metal album from Poppy, who I personally knew as someone who did eerie and nonsensical videos, not music. Shows what I know. And this album is literally banger after banger after banger that just takes you on a journey. Take, for example, the title track, I Disagree, which opens with lyrics in Japanese that roughly translate to I disagree with you, followed by a hard rock riff. Poppy speaks or yells the verses, sings the chorus, and then there's this post-chorus that's like a metalcore breakdown. Then there's a small section, a lick after the chorus that segues into the bridge that sounds like a small Queen or like Brian May solo. What is this? Or take the song Blood Money, which also features yelled but not quite screamed vocals in the chorus and the verses, even some spoken sections, but then the chorus is just this dubstep-like section, but it's played as if it were a guitar, and every time there's a break in the riff, there's a small scream or breather from Poppy, so it just feels like we're on a dubstep guitar roller coaster with Poppy. This album is just so much fun, I'll stop talking about it, just go and listen to it. At number 1 we have Black Dresses, Peaceful as Hell. Yeah, At number 1, I have to put Peaceful as Hell by Black Dresses. This is a duo that I only discovered this year, and sadly also only after they broke up. As a band, that is, not as a couple, fortunately. And while they are technically speaking no longer a band, they still keep releasing a song here, a cover there, a remix for 100 gecs. And if their debut, Waste Isolation, would have came out this year, it would have probably taken the number 1 spot for me. But anyway, Peaceful as Hell is everything that Black Dresses are known for. Noise pop, cute catchy tunes, depressing topics, turned up to 11. And damn, this album is cute, it's sweet, it's catchy, it's sad, it's everything you'd want. Musically, it features such charming features as distorted instrumentation, endearing sort of off-tune one-track only singing, some screaming here and there for the extra flavor, for the extra emotion. One of the best additions in my honest opinions to Black Dresses' usual repertoire is the inclusion of guitars in some songs here and there. Take, for example, Scared to Death, which is, for all intents and purposes, an alternative rock banger. What makes it even more special is that it's a Black Dresses song, with cute distorted synths in the background, a drum and bass beat in the first half, and a somewhat confused outro where everything happens at once, featuring a surprisingly non-distorted, crisp-sounding drum kit playing fillers. I think the highlight of this album must be Please Be Nice, a song about the experiences of becoming somewhat known online, which in turn leads to harassment from total strangers who feel entitled to say whatever they want. My favorite part of this song is the second time they sing Don't Be Weird, Don't Be Mean, with Rook basically screaming it in a very pained, high-pitched scream that at least sounds like it's from the bottom of her lungs. And then in the same section, while Rook screams, It's my world, it's my life, Devi at the same time sings, She's my world, she's my life. And I just think that's extremely cute. And at the same time completely heartbreaking, right in the gut. The fact that this segues into an indie song is very funny to me. This album is an emotional roller coaster, and it is the best thing that came out of 2020. Well, this is the end. Thank you very much for watching if you came so far. Usually there would be credits here, but I have nobody to credit beside myself, so yeah, I'd like to shout out a couple of other albums that came out this year that didn't make the list or didn't quite qualify, like the Hades soundtrack, because damn, I love it. It's the doom metal song when you fight the Hydra, Lerny. It's amazing. And then I'd like to shout out the 100 gecs remix album, which is amazing. Let me see. I'd like to shout out my friend Tuliips, who didn't release 1 but 3 projects this year, starting with Prairie, which contains a droning song and a shoegaze song, and then they released Is This a Demo Tape? Maybe a demo tape, which is more drony, and then they released another record or something called Rain Session Piano Jam. It's a piano jam, as the title says. Then there's this experimental IDM electronic music EP, Silicon, by my friend noidzh. I'll link it in the description. Then there's Everything Falls Apart As It Should by We Too Will Fade from Munich. It's a melodic hardcore, post-hardcore EP. It's great. Give it a listen. Anyway, thank you. Bye.